Just go to wikipedia.com and look at Merab Dvalishvili's wins list, Mike. What else are we doing, right? It took him 10 wins to get the undisputed title shot. Now he has 12 wins in a row. He could be 14-0 in the UFC with respect to Frankie Saenz and Ricky Simon. Mike, he beat Henry Cejudo, Petr Yan, and Jose Aldo successively to earn his championship opportunity, 3 former undisputed UFC bantamweight champions. Case closed, right? The thing is that if Sean O'Malley had beaten Merab, look what that would have done for him. But now when you stack the O'Malley and Umar wins on top of fucking Cejudo and Yan and Aldo, Merab Dvalishvili is the greatest bantamweight of all time with respect to Dominic Cruz, Aljamain Sterling, and anybody else. Case closed.
All right, everybody. Jon Anik is back. He will be calling the action at UFC 316 in Newark. The man who wears many hats, commentator, host, MC, press conference host, fight breaker, apparently. You have been a very busy man, Jon Anik. How are you?
Oh, it's great to see you. I'm excited to get back at it. You know, sometimes when I go 2 or 3 weeks without calling a live event, I wonder if I still have it. So big pay-per-view, Brick City. I'll be pumping Redman's jersey, all week, and we're excited to get to Newark.
Look at you out here reporting news. You thought you put the journalism hat away, Jon Anik, but it's just become no, but of like all seriousness, like seeing you have to deal with all of this. This is to me, and I tell people this all the time. This has become a really frustrating part of the gig because you say things sort of tongue in cheek, and I say things on shows like, I've heard like the UFC's working on this, and I have to like at this point in my career, and it's so annoying. I have to be like, don't go and report this, that it's done. Like, I'm just saying like, the water cooler talk right now. And these friggin' aggregator sites who don't actually do the work, they're just like, yeah, Jon Anik said Belal Muhammad's fighting Shavkat Rakhmonov in October. Mark it down, book your flights, book your hotel. Did you even see that coming? You just say a thing tongue in cheek on your show, and then all of a sudden you're reporting one of the biggest fights in the welterweight division all of a sudden?
Well, thankfully, I didn't see it on MMAfighting.com, and certainly my bosses know to sort of ingest all of my words before maybe jumping to any conclusion. So essentially what happened, and Ray Longo and I have fun on the Anick and Florian podcast, but this was not fun. Ray essentially said that his gym manager, to put his kids to bed, puts on Belal Muhammad fights. And he knows of my personal friendship with Belal Muhammad. So later in the conversation, Ray Longo asks me, how do you feel about Belal? And I said, I feel pretty good about Belal. He's got an undisputed UFC welterweight championship belt at home, and he's married to the game. So I'm pretty confident that he'll spin this thing forward to the positive. What's Shavkat Rakhmonov doing in October? There's your breaking news, or whatever I said, right? But it was part of a greater conversation, in some part me coming to defend my friend, but anyone who ingested the conversation in totality knew that there was nothing resembling breaking news. And certainly there have been times, I guess, over the years where the Anick and Florian podcast or Ray Longo has broken some news, but it is not a conduit through which news is broken. So yes, it was very surprising to see that positioned as breaking news, and almost fired my social media team when I saw them try to position it as such in a very lazy way. On my podcast, I should say.
You mentioned like the UFC understands to kind of take your words at face value because you've been with them forever. But did anybody get mad at you or reach out to you? Because people don't realize that stuff can happen when these things get taken out of context, that managers get phone calls and if you say something, you get a phone call, or if I say something, I get a phone call. Like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? And I'm just like, listen to the whole conversation. Then you'll understand that I'm not trying to do anything malicious here.
Yeah, thankfully, my bosses, were they to ingest it, Craig Borsari, Zach Candido, they would make sure to listen to everything that I say, whether it comes to 209 tattoos or custody battles or anything else that I've had to deal with, defending colleagues, or maybe at times having to say something because I felt like a colleague is coming a fighter. There've been a lot of different instances over the years, but I was absolutely convicted that in this particular situation, I wouldn't have heard anything. Any journalist would have looked at Shavkat Rakhmonov recently undergoing surgery, Belal Muhammad's face recovering from a fight fucking 10 days ago, right? But if you watch Belal Muhammad and my twin brother on Remember the Show, I went on and I asked Belal, what's your dream month in which to compete? Forget Kamaru Usman, who's not going to compete in June and October. What's the dream month? And Belal said October. So I was working off of October, but it ain't going to be that fight. And I was just going at Ray Longo, and it mushroomed into something that I couldn't have possibly foreseen.
Yes, if you're coming up in the game, make sure you listen to the entire thing. Don't just go off what social media tells you, because 90% of the time it is not true. And as John said, if it's not on MMAfighting.com, it's not a real thing. But the Belal Muhammad thing, that fight with Jack Della Maddalena it was so good. It's one of those fights that actually gets better the more you watch it, because it was great the first time. And I remember, because we're doing the watch party, there's so much going on. I was like, I remember it being so good watching it live. And then I rewatched it the next day to see if my scoring remained the same. And I was like, holy shit, this fight was unbelievable. And I'd since watched it 2 other times, and it's just unbelievable. And then hearing Belal talk about it on Remember the Show, we had a game plan. We went against it. I was just having so much fun out there. I wanted to prove that I could stand with him. And boy, did he. It was just such an amazing fight, John. And to see where Belal is at all these days later with the relationship you have, what is that like for you? Because you know this guy, now the world is getting to see the kind of guy he is, even coming after a big loss like this.
It's really interesting. If you take Belal Muhammad at his word that this was the strongest and the best that he has ever felt, it makes the performance from Jack Della Maddalena seem like it should be even more elevated. And I think my biggest takeaway, Michael, from that fight was that Jack Della Maddalena might actually reign for a long time. If he can sort of duplicate this performance, I'm not sure he could have performed better in his first UFC championship setting. So I do think that this loss will age gracefully for Belal Muhammad. But I did disagree a little bit with my twin brother in terms of the immediate assessment of Belal thereafter. Jason sort of suggested that I feel like I'm talking to the same guy. And I do feel like this is going to be a real hurdle for Belal to overcome. I'm encouraged that he's married to the game. I'm encouraged that I thought his boxing really did look outstanding. And I do believe that skill for skill, he is ascending and getting better, despite the fact that he's closer to 40 than 30. But I do think there are a lot of stiff challenges that await. I think it's fortunate for him that as a former champion, he now represents the biggest fight for a lot of these guys. But yeah, I just think that it's going to be a real tell, that next fight for Belal Muhammad. And I think if he can perform the way a lot of us think he can, then it might actually be one fight until he gets back to a title, despite the fact that people think promotionally that's not the direction in which they could go. But it's going to be hard getting out the other side of this one. I don't know that there's any way to sugarcoat that.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. But again, 2025, we say this all the time. Availability is your best ability. And if Islam wins not Islam, but if JDM beats Islam and JDM's like, oh, I want to fight on this card in this date, and Belal's ready and he's the only guy, he'll get it. So phone rings, you say yes. And I think Belal knows that at this point. Yeah. And we all know that UFC 316 is happening soon in Newark. We know both bantamweight titles are on the line. We got Merab, Shawn O'Malley 2 in a rematch. We got Juliana Pena defending her title against Kayla Harrison. When the stakes are high like this, and I'm not just talking about the championship, John, there are storylines and stakes attached for all 4 of these fighters. I'm sure you can't help but be excited to call the action for both of these championship bouts.
Yeah, so I had a chance to sit down with Shawn O'Malley recently. We sometimes do these one-on-ones in advance of these advanced press conferences. And one theme going into the first fight, Noche UFC, between Merab and Shawn O'Malley was, and I guess you can say this is out the other side of it, but over-promising and under-delivering. That Shawn O'Malley was over-promising in terms of what he was going to do in performance and then under-delivered relative to those expectations. If you're going into the fight with some sort of hip injury, right, a torn labrum in your hip, and it's so bad that you actually have the surgery scheduled for the other side of the fight. Shawn O'Malley had hip surgery scheduled for after the Merab fight. Why are we over-promising on that performance? And I think part of it was that, it was a relatively short training camp for Shawn O'Malley, but he wanted to headline that particular show at Sphere. The promotion was entrusting him with that. How much do you believe that any of that is a modicum of a factor when it comes to this particular matchup, right? Because Morab Dvalishvili is a force of nature unlike anything I have ever seen in the fight game. And I do think that he's going to have to be studied upon his passing and opened up to see just how much of a man he is versus a machine. So Sean O'Malley's hip has been fixed. He has made wholesale changes professionally and personally. Will that help him produce the desired result? I don't know. I just went back and watched the previous fight, and I'm trying to not think, he couldn't wrestle during training camp the whole time. But I actually think there's a lot of margins in there for Merab to do even more. You know, he did showboat a lot. He did sit on a lead a little bit. All those questions give way to answers, but I do think you're going to see a better Sean O'Malley. I do think he's going to be more aggressive in sort of trying to find that fight-ending shot. But I'm going to have to see somebody beat this version of Merab with my own eyes, and I haven't seen that in a really long time.
Sean kind of posted that video not long after that fight that he won 3-5 or whatever he said, and he at least has like reached out to a lot of people and said, "Look, watch the fight without any commentary, or just be completely focused on it. And I guarantee you feel that the fight is closer than you thought it was watching it the first time." So when you went back and rewatched it, did you feel the same way as Sean, that like, hey, it wasn't as big of a blowout as maybe I thought watching it the first time? Maybe Sean has a point. It was a little bit closer.
Sure. And Kenny Florian and I just watched it back for Anick and Florian Rewind on UFC Fight Pass, and you can watch our ongoing commentary with comedy. But 1-5, I guess, you know, but no, it just, as it was playing out, it did not feel like a particularly close fight. Certainly, I think based upon my interpretation of the rules and damage, that shot to the body accompanied with the other work in round 5 was enough for me to give O'Malley round 5. But I think Merab's going to be better, you know, in the second fight. You know, there's a lot of learning and things to be extracted from that matchup for Merab as well. So I don't know. I'm encouraged by both sides. I think it's more competitive than the betting line indicates, to be sure. I don't know if that says that I see value on Sean. But yeah, like I will not be surprised if O'Malley performs really well and potentially finishes Merab, but I got to see it to believe.
Yeah, he's been so different in the build to this fight. Very quiet, not still confident, but the big predictions, like you said, they're not really there. He's just one word answers. Is very short with everybody. And you mentioned sort of the focus on getting rid of the stuff that maybe poisoned his brain a little bit. Some of the extracurricular activities, or just fully the video games, just fully focused on Merab in the training camp and the fight. He's not talking a bunch of crap. He's not doing a bunch of media. So the stakes are very high for him. And one thing that I really didn't even think about until I heard him say it, Chael Sonnen, you know, the great Chael Sonnen likes to say things, but he has been around the block a few times, and he thinks for O'Malley, it's either regain this belt or you're done at 135. You're moving up to featherweight. And he sort of made a comparison like Sean would be to bantamweight what Rich Franklin was to middleweight after Anderson Silva came along. Do you think there's something to that? Or do you feel like if Sean loses, he's still got a path back, as long as, even with Merab as champion, then maybe they go to the well a third time, which is very tough to do?
I don't know what the internal metrics say in terms of how big a superstar Sean O'Malley is relative to, say, Israel Adesanya or Alex Pineda. But in part, he is getting this immediate rematch because he checks a lot of boxes. And I understand that the weight cut is not easy for him. It's not easy for Merab. Merab will weigh more on fight night, in my opinion. I think Sean O'Malley could be wicked competitive at 145 pounds, but I do think you're sort of moving up there with finality, and you're trying to add muscle mass and be a totally different package physically in that weight class. Alexandre Pantoja is a guy that a lot of fans would like to see fight Merab. But if Pantoja is going to fight Merab, he's going to move up to bantamweight with finality. He's going to take the requisite 6, 8, 10 months and put on muscle and actually try to beat Merab, and not be an undersized version trying to, beat Merab twice out of 10 times. I think there's so many big fights for O'Malley, the Jan rematch, the Sandhagen fight, the Umar Nurmagomedov fight. There's so many big fights at 35, and size matters. So, I understand Chael Sonnen's school of thought, but I think Sean O'Malley's long game is at bantamweight, unless, maybe he said something otherwise.
If Merab wins, is he the bantamweight GOAT? I mean, he's got a case now.
He already is. You think
so? You think he's there?
Is my best friend.
All right. Some people are there already. Some people want to see a little bit more. You're already there, but a win just increases the lead.
If I got married this weekend, Dominic Cruz would be a groomsman. But to me, and Faraz Sahabi would probably land on the Dominic Cruz side. We had a little bit of a spirited conversation about this on the Anick and Flooring podcast. But just go to wikipedia.com and look at Merab Dvalishvili's wins list, Mike. What else are we doing, right? It took him 10 wins to get the undisputed title shot. Now he has 12 wins in a row. He could be 14-0 in the UFC with respect to Frankie Saenz and Ricky Simon. Mike, he beat Henry Cejudo, Petr Yan, and Jose Aldo successively to earn his championship opportunity, 3 former undisputed UFC bantamweight champions. Case closed, right? The thing is that if Sean O'Malley had beaten Merab, look what that would have done for him. But now when you stack the O'Malley and Umar wins on top of fucking Cejudo and Yan and Aldo, Merab Dvalishvili is the greatest bantamweight of all time with respect to Dominic Cruz, Aljamain Sterling, and anybody else. Case closed.
Fair enough. All right. Listen, hey.
You agree?
I get where you're coming from, and I'm not saying no. Bantamweight is so strange. Like for me, it's featherweight, it's Jose Aldo. Although Volk has closed the gap. He has closed the gap, and I think if he fights Movsar Evloev, which it doesn't look like he's going to next, I think we are at least in the conversation for a tie. Maybe Volk takes the lead. I think he's right there, maybe a win away. Lightweight, there's Habib and BJ Penn, and we know who it is. We top of mind, we could say somebody and feel it. Bantamweight, even with Merab doing what he's done, I still feel like it's well, you could still make a case for Cruz. You could still make a case for Dom or for Merab. You can make a case for Aljo. You can maybe make a case for other guys. But I think one more win gets him there, 100%. I think if he beats Sean, it's the same thing. I think that conversation is no longer a thinker. It's Merab.
Yeah.
But again, today it could be Dom, and tomorrow you could ask me, and it could be Merab. I don't think there's a true wrong answer right now. But if Merab wins at UFC 316, I think Dominic Cruz would be the wrong answer.
Well, and I think your points are all fair. And I'm also a modern era guy, right? I have deep appreciation for Israel Adesanya's middleweight reign when compared to Anderson Silva's title reign. In some part because I believe in the modern era and how talented the number one contender types are now relative to past eras. And sometimes it's hard, as Faraz and I sort of conversed about, to compare the Dominic Cruz era to the modern era.
It is. It's like the Jordan LeBron debate, even though that's absolutely silly, but we don't have to go down that rabbit hole right now. But it is a fascinating time when talking about who the best in these divisions are. And another decade from now, it's going to be an even crazier conversation. And bantamweight is just a great, fun, deep division. And there's guys coming. We'll talk about one in a second, but let's talk about Juliana Pena. She is back. She is running her mouth. She's saying things, and I love it. And Kayla Harrison is just soaking it all in. And John, I'm sure you have seen this all over the place. Oh, this fight just needs to happen. Kayla just needs to make weight. She's going to step in the cage. She's going to run roughshod over Juliana Pena. She's going to maul her. This is going to be one-way traffic. But I got to tell you, John, Juliana Pena is getting counted out of this fight. And I think that is incredibly dangerous to do that.
I agree, Mike. I agree. I'm not even sure I have too much to add, except that I just recently went back and watched Amanda Nunez versus Juliana Pena 1. And that's all the film I need to watch right now. Certainly Rick Little has said superlative to me over the years, just how mean and nasty she is. And man or woman, she is just a nasty fucking prick. And I just think toughness plus cardio plus self-belief plus just the desire to be in the trenches, right? She's never looking for a way out. She's not looking to tap because the going gets tough. And I think that's what you need against an otherworldly decorated two-time Olympic champion like Kayla Harrison that has to deal with a fight before the fight, unlike few fighters really have to deal with, right? And that's probably something that I shouldn't say in a broad sense, but I can't help but wonder aloud how many times Kayla Harrison is going to be able to make weight in defending this belt if she's actually able to win it. I don't know the answer. There's not a UFC women's featherweight division as far as I'm concerned right now. So There are a lot of question marks on the Kayla Harrison side, but I think for me, I'm just really encouraged by Juliana Pena's experience, her doggedness, and her sort of, as trite as it sounds, like never say die attitude.
Yeah, that 1 pound is incredibly fascinating. That Friday weigh-in, which you'll have the mic for, will be incredibly fascinating to watch. And Juliana Pena, people just don't like her, but she's a dog, man. Like watching the Harrison Ketlin Vieira fight, I knew that was gonna be a tough fight for Kayla because Ketlin is a dog too. And I just think that I don't know if it's hatred, but it's just the pure feeling for Juliana. Just people just count her out. And the more I watch film in preparation for this fight, the more I feel like Juliana might just go out there and win this fight. Like it's gonna be really fun. I think it's gonna be an absolute war. And people can kind of like poo-poo the announcement or whatever. Whatever. I love the fight. I think it's gonna be a war, man. A bloody battle.
Yeah. So I don't know if Juliana Pena can shoot a basketball, but she looks really athletic at times in there. And when you look at some of the accuracy that she displayed against Amanda Nunez, in those clutch moments of that fight, I think it is encouraging because the fight game can really be about a singular moment. And if she can create one early, it can change the entire complexion of the fight. Now, we could sit here and talk glowingly about Kayla Harrison. She is a 6-1 favorite. And maybe you and I would say perhaps prohibitively, but I really do believe that Juliana Pena historically has been counted out. She's being counted out again. And even if you think there's some abrasion with the way she builds the fight, right? I do think if you just take her at her word, I love the way she promotes fights. I like what comes out of her mouth. I like the confidence. Um, the issue might just be that the opponent is just that good. And that's why I think you share my enthusiasm for UFC 316.
Nunez gonna fight either one of these women, you think? Or does it have to be Kayla winning for her to come back?
I don't see any upside for Amanda Nunez in fighting Juliana Pena a third time, except monetary upside. So yeah, I think it would be the Kayla Harrison fight that would get her off the couch, so to speak. But sometimes there's just downside, right? Like going into this NBA postseason, it's like there's so much downside for the Celtics. Only bad things can happen when I'm watching the Celtics in this defense of the championship. And I think for Amanda Nunez, if you're talking straight legacy, as Zhang Wei Li chases her down to become the greatest women's mixed martial arts athlete of all time, as Valentina Shevchenko continues to stack wins, opening the conversation for the greatest women's mixed martial arts athlete of all time, is legacy enough to bring Amanda Nunez back? Is it money? I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, that Amanda Nunez status as the greatest women's mixed martial arts athlete of all time has been challenged greatly over the last 12 months by Valentina Shevchenko and Zhang Wei.
Completely agree. We also got Kelvin Gastelum and Joe Pyfer, that fight from Mexico that got rebooked. Vicente Luque, Kevin Holland. And we got the UFC debut of Patchy Mix, Jon Anik. We heard rumblings, rumor, and innuendo. Patchy got released from the UFC or from PFL. It was both sides were in agreement of it. And we saw that Marlon Vera was out, and people already started reporting Patchy is in. Took a few days, took a few phone calls, but eventually we got it in. Patchy Mix is getting his opportunity at the UFC and against Mario Bautista. I love this fight so much, John. And here's why. We are going to know everything we are going to know about Patchy Mix and his UFC ceiling in 15 minutes or less. We are going to know if this man is going to fight for a bantamweight title or if he's just going to be a top 10, top 15 guy who's going to be in really fun, competitive fights. I feel like if he wins this fight and does an impressive fashion, he might just get himself a title shot right away. But if he loses to Mario Bautista and it is not the most thrilling affair, it's not good for him. It just isn't. And I feel like the stakes of anybody not fighting for a belt, Patchy Mix is right there. He needs this one and he needs to be impressive, at least in my eyes. Your thoughts on what's on the line for Patchy Mix?
Well, I'm curious what your opinion is of Mario Bautista, because there are some parallels to be drawn, albeit not completely, with the Patricio Pitbull situation. He was fighting a rather decorated former UFC interim featherweight champion in Yair Rodriguez. So if I could quickly spin it back to you, do you feel as highly about Mario Bautista's potential as I do? Because, you know, I work for the UFC, and 2 months ago, I find myself with Patchy Mix at a power slap event. I'm like, dude, we got to get you to the UFC, and now I feel like we need to promote Mario, Super Mario, a little bit, try to sort of hold serve as the incumbent, the guy who's been there. So, what does a win over Mario Bautista really tell you based upon what you think about the guy that's been there and done that and won 7 straight in the octagon?
I think Mario is a very good fighter. I think his perception kind of drags him down a little bit, and that's not really his fault. But I think because of how the fan base feels about Mario right now, and again, Patchy goes out and like flying knees Mario Bautista unconscious in round 1, that place is going to erupt. He is going to look like an absolute friggin' superstar. And every post-fight show that happens around the world is going to have Patchy Mix in the headline. So it is a
Patchy Mix,
massive
right?
moment. Yeah, it's a Patchy Mix. It becomes this type person won the belt, this person leaves with the belt, and Patchy Mix wrecks Mario Bautista. Like that is the big storyline coming out of this event. And I think because of how the fan base feels about Mario Bautista, most notably because of how the Jose Aldo fight ended, to me, he gets immediately over with the fan base. Like the hardcores, you, me, and the Caposas of the world. We all know who Patchy Mix is, but there is a big percentage of folks who are going to be watching all the UFC coverage heading into this fight card on Saturday who have no clue who this guy is. They've just heard of him, but they've never seen him fight. They don't know anything about him. So if he immerses himself into the fan base with a win over a guy that people they know is good, but they're not very high on in terms of we love this guy, he immediately gets over with these people. And that outside of Dana and the brass, that's who you want to get over with. Not me, not my colleagues. It's the fan base. And Patchy will look like a star if he does that.
And he can do it all, right? And it's so interesting to think about his relationship with Merab Dvalishvili as you spin it forward. If he does get through Mario Bautista, there are a lot of different angles here. I was just looking down at my phone trying to pluck a betting line on Patchy Mix versus Mario Bautista because I do believe Patchy Mix will be the favorite, albeit slightly. But it's a different show, and I think Patchy Mix is well equipped to handle it. He's like the chomping at the bit type, and I do think there's a lot of value that he gained just from being there side by side with Tatiana against Zhang Wei Li. As I was mentioning, the fact that his name is Patchy Mix and not Jonathan Stern, I think is something of value. But I'm really thinking that there's even more upside potentially for Mario Bautista, right? And even when you think about Movsar Evloev potentially fighting an incoming Aaron Pico, right? Like, all right, Mario Bautista, crazy that we would have to say something like try to distance yourself from a win over Jose Aldo that extended your winning streak to 7, but distance yourself from that against an electric Patchy Mix who really isn't involved in a lot of boring fights. This could be the foundation for Mario to really reassert himself. But I don't know, man. I get very frustrated for a guy like Bautista and how his last win was handled, and now a golden opportunity for him to sort of right that right, so to speak.
Yeah, and even in the build to that Aldo fight, I was like, I just don't see a lot of paths to victory for Mario. But if he could hold Aldo up against the fence and just like control him up there and just be annoying, like he'll win. And he just did that and won the fight. Like for anybody who had a bet on Jose Aldo, you're kind of pissed off. And for anybody who wanted to see Jose Aldo fight for a bantamweight title before he called it a career, yeah, you were frustrated watching that. You definitely were. But in terms of a guy who it's important for him to just get wins at this point, especially even if he's got a green mark next to Jose Aldo. It's like getting an infield single in baseball. In the newspaper, it's dude got a single. It doesn't matter how he got it. He got the freaking single and he got on base. That's what Mario Bautista did.
Yeah, I'm excited for him. And I really like that gym and what John Crouch and Benson Henderson have done. They've essentially been aligned for 20 years or so. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it's really hard for fighters, right? I remember when Paul Felder lost to Edson Barboza the first time they fought. And Paul was the toast of the town because it was a close fight and he lost. Then in the rematch, he gets the nod against Edson. And it seemed like a lot of the MMA masses thought that Paul had lost that fight. And, as he's trying to enjoy a post-fight cheeseburger in Abu Dhabi, he's catching strays from the fan base, So it can be a thankless space for fighters. And that's why I am apologetically going to build all of these men and women up. Patchy Mix belongs in the UFC. We'll see what he has for one of our best,
Yep, absolutely. Last thing I want to ask you before we let you go is, I've been asking everybody that I've been speaking with for the past few weeks, ever since this fight was officially announced, Dustin Poirier's final fight, The Last Dance, is booked. Fighting Max Holloway. The man that Max Holloway debuted against is the man Dustin Poirier will end his career against. BMF title on the line in New Orleans. Very big deal. And I know you have stories and favorite moments of Dustin Poirier. You could probably write a book about him, John, but favorite Dustin Poirier moment? Is there a favorite Dustin Poirier story, a conversation you had? Like when I say, John, tell me about Dustin Poirier, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
I remember when the Fightville DVD crossed my cubicle desk at ESPN in the early 2000s, right around 2007 or so. I'm not sure there's a man who's a better personification of what it takes to evolve from very little to become an elite UFC fighter. In terms of in octagon moments, the second round against Dan Hooker inside the UFC Apex during a global pandemic is something that I will never forget. And really, that fight in totality, I think if you're looking at a Dan Hooker or Dustin Poirier fight that's going to go into the Hall of Fame, that would be the one for me. But the crowning moment, and my call, I believe, said something like Dustin Poirier has knocked out Conor McGregor, right? Need I say more? I remember being at the Residence Inn, and again, this was January of 2021. We're all getting ready to charter a flight on Etihad Airways to Abu Dhabi to Fight Island, and just feeling like Dustin was a little bit tense, and nothing tense about him when he knocked out Conor McGregor and gave himself financial freedom on the most fateful night of his career. So, yeah, I mean, for those that sort of planted their flag on Dustin Poirier and anointed him as their favorite fighter early on, you couldn't have sort of aligned with a better guy just in terms of the person, the fighter, and yeah, just an absolute dog. I think of him in a red hat that just says war, and honored to call his final dance.
Love it. John, looking forward to hearing you call that fight. Everything happening at UFC 316 in Newark, New Jersey. Appreciate your time as always. Thank you for getting me fired up as you always do. And we're excited to hear you on the call along with the great DC and Joe Rogan this Saturday. Well, it will be the Saturday as this drops, but there you go. Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. And if I ever have any breaking news, I'll just email it to you and you guys can find a second source and break the news.